Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 4. Welcome to the show. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing a new book with Josh Bookman. It sounds pretty interesting, actually. I'm looking forward to it. We will then continue our Season 1 review of Sense8 with Albert Nothlit, and then Baz and I are going to share what's won our week, and I hope by then I've got something. So stay tuned, stick with us. But now, on to our guest. Joshua Kent Bookman was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and reformed by life and work in Sweden, France, and Italy. He has studied songwriting at Berklee College of Music, as well as language at the Middlebury Italian School, Syracuse University, Alliance Française, and Folkuniversitetet. He holds a BA from Brandeis University, and I hope I said that right, and an M.F.A. from ArtCenter College of Design. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Baz and Baz. Nice to be here.
So it sounds like you've had a life steeped in creativity. When did you decide to start writing novels?
It was pretty random, to be honest. I had no intention of being a writer. I was in design school, as you mentioned, and then I was looking for a job after school, and I was doing an interview in Stockholm in Sweden for a position, and they had asked me because I had to learn Swedish. They were sort of curious why I was learning, why I was there, and they wanted me to write a short story about it. So I did, and then they were like, "We really like this short story. Would you want to write a book?" And I said, "Sure, why not? I have no other jobs going on." So that was like sort of the beginning, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But like writing creativity it's funny because I went to a high school where I would say like the arts, nothing was funded in terms of the priority. It was like math and science or, preparing you for that track for university. So it wasn't until later, because even when I was because I grew up in Boston, but living in LA, it was amazing to me how many kids would say, "Oh, I went to this performing arts school for high school or this theater," or like that was never part of my vocabulary. So, yeah, I would say slightly random, but I took the chance. I didn't say like, "Oh, this isn't for me." I said, "Why not?"
And that was your first novel, right?
Yeah. And then I probably took 3 years to write this one, because first one, I think, sort of like if you took Polaroids, like 1,000 Polaroids, and put them all on the ground and then tried to reassemble, it was much more experimental in terms of the composition of the piece. And this one, I was like, let me see it sort of like a painter. Can the painter actually draw like a real, like per stroke perfect image, sort of like the Dutch painters, So I was like, can I write a conventional story with a storyline? Like, so that was part of the goal with this one.
All right.
Yeah.
So the novel, To All the Friends I Killed.
Yeah.
If you want to hold up the cover for people.
Oh, yeah.
So is it a treasure map of where you buried them? Or
Absolutely. More friends than people know about. No. I can keep pulling it up, actually.
So what's the basic elevator pitch for this book before we dive into the topics?
I would say it's a coming of age for your late 20s or even early 30s. I feel like a lot of young adult literature focuses on that teenager phase, but I think for a variety of reasons, there's a delayed adolescence. And also, I think it's that age that doesn't get talked about enough, in terms of you're an adult, you have a lot of choices, you have more experiences than when you were 20. And I think he's sort of choosing many different lives at that point. Like, he's accumulated enough experiences, this main character, but now he has to kill off certain paths. And I think that would be a good description of it.
Perfect. All right. So you did say you based this on the millennial generation.
Mm-hmm.
Was that an important distinction for you?
I think so. Because I think at least our generation is between having phones, internet, like we had pre-digital life. Like I can tell you, we're not like TikTok, even though we can do TikTok. We're not like the digital natives, even though we're also good at it. But like, we still have that pre and post type of world. And I think it's not like a lost generation, but I definitely think it's, it's not like the baby boomers who have all the income and capital at this point. We're still sort of like the ones waiting for that power, or at least more power. Yeah.
And I only ask this because I'm the generation older than you, but does it feel like a lost promise? Like you were
Yeah,
raised to
it's
think
almost
everything,
like, Bush's No Child Left Behind. It's like basically that, but we were sort of, I think, partially forgotten.
and
Um,
that colors your character's experience.
I think so, not like necessarily in the book um, all the time, but I think it influences the context of it. Especially part of the book takes place in Provincetown. Provincetown is much different now than it was for the generation previous.
Hmm.
I'd have to say, in terms of housing availability, in terms of being an arts colony, sort of all these other. If the book had taken place 30 years ago, it would have been a much different Provincetown coming of age, I think.
Hmm. Right. Interesting that you mentioned Provincetown too, because your next topic with then was the queer or asexual attitude toward contemporary loneliness.
Hmm.
Provincetown's all about coming together.
Yeah, I think this character, because like Provincetown historically has the Portuguese community, has the Jamaican community, it has the gay and lesbian community, queer community. You
Hmm.
also have the straight community buying property from Truro and Wellfleet now into Provincetown. Um, I think there's a variety of communities within, like, whatever someone's image of it as a fantasy land. There's also like the Washer Shores, if you've heard that term, or I don't know if people, essentially people who come to Provincetown, maybe they've tried New York or Los Angeles or some bigger city, but they feel washed up or overwhelmed by it, and then they
Okay.
come ashore to Provincetown, which is very welcoming as a place. Um, but that doesn't mean uh, it takes a while to build community. It's not instantaneous. So I think, unfortunately, I don't think this character spends enough time in Provincetown to get that, but um, he's putting pressure on what it means to be a welcoming place, or like, if housing is really expensive now. Again, it's not directly mentioned in the book, but what does that mean for someone who's younger, who's trying to manage all these more emotional decisions?
Plus, I think it also highlights how you can be alone in a sea of people.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing.
I forget who said it, but it's like, in New York, you're anonymous, but like not by choice, or like something like, and then comparing to Los Angeles, where you're anonymous, but you can choose. I don't know, but there are many ways to be anonymous still, or even alone. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, because you can have a bad day, and that colors your whole experience. You know. Um,
So, what is the source of your character's loneliness?
I think part of it is, if we're like talking about late 20s, people are starting to partner,
Mm,
and he's sort of either not found one yet, or is questioning why is the partner the most important relationship of our lives, when maybe growing up he's had to rely on more friendships than actual family, which frames his values as maybe friends are actually more valuable, or just as valuable. So I think his loneliness is, even if he's decided to go on this journey of thinking about friendships more often, people are still partnering up anyway. So I think he gets left behind on some level, and or at least it's
That's
unresolved.
his impression. Hmm.
Yeah, that's his impression, that at least, especially this girl, he develops a really close relationship with. He feels let down by her, because she's decided to move on, even if she hasn't told him directly. No one, like, even though ghosting is a thing, I think even your closest friends are not, even if they're your good friends, they're not going to tell you, I'm now moving on from you. It's not like people
Right.
sit
Right.
down and have that conversation. It's more subtle, or more, yeah, it's a much different experience.
Yeah.
um,
It's slipping away rather than just an abrupt "I'm out."
yeah, and I'll also say, he's lonely too, because he flies to France to think like that's the way to get away. The James Baldwin, I don't know if it's his route or Hemingway. It's like, you go you go abroad to have the experience of refining what the US is. And that is also a lonely experience because he doesn't know anyone.
And sometimes you're disillusioned with when you come back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Does he self-identify as asexual, or is that just more of a pattern in his life?
I don't think he knows.
Okay.
I don't think I think it's a good question. I think because the book really isn't focused sexual in nature, even though that's the surrounding landscape. I think he's just decided to concentrate, at least what's covered in the book, these relationships that really matter that aren't sexual. And yeah.
So does the title refer to those friendships that have moved on, or his own past lives that he's moving on from?
I think both.
Okay.
I think because sort of as the book progresses, we think he's in a psych ward or a psych clinic. So I think the reliability of what's killed is important. Sort of like you said, like, is it himself he's let down or killed off, or have other people left him behind, and that's the death, or even like something as people who are not friends, like acquaintance, someone you meet at a bus stop, you have a great conversation with, or a grocery store that you'll never see again. That's not that you track that person down and be like, hey, wait, if we just maintained our friendship, we would have been, because they're only.
I was back at the store and you didn't show up.
Usually those like Craigslist lost connections are just for like lovers, so like no one does them for, because I can think of so many books like Sula by Toni Morrison is all about friendship. The Ferrante books, the My Beautiful Friend, all about this intense relationship she has with this girl who they grow up and sort of split. I'm trying to think of others, but I'm blanking. But, yeah.
So is the pairing up, having a relationship, what you're referring to with the last topic about the postponement of traditional benchmarks?
Yeah, I think, first of all, at least the millennial generation, a lot of student debt, unaffordable housing, like having to find more creative ways to live because the white picket fence house isn't the goal, or the dream, or that dream is unavailable. I would also say, I lost my train of thought, but sorry.
It's fine.
It's just it's not like or even the nuclear family is not the mindset anymore. At least I don't think for the millennial generation. I think we think much differently about how to live or how to share space.
So circling back to the conversation about tech coming into your lives as opposed to having always been there, do you think that started to separate you as a generation more than bring you together?
I think it just changed our attention. I think social media can be good, and even like a podcast, like to be able to diffuse something globally is it's really powerful. But it's sort of like the book is no longer the only medium. There's TV, there's radio, there's the internet. There's just so many ways to get access. So if you're not Beyonce or Jay-Z or Biden, whoever has already a mega platform, then it's really hard, I think, to get attention everywhere. Because some people prefer Facebook, some people prefer Instagram. So I think it's even more the last 5 years with all the social media, and you can add TikTok now too. The attention has changed, or how we get attention has changed.
Do you think it has also instilled a weird desire for attention that didn't exist in previous generations?
I don't know. I read this. It was a nonfiction book called The Price of Time. It was about like interest rates, essentially, something really boring. But
okay,
there was a quote at the beginning from like a Assyrian tablet from like 3000 BC. It was like, there are too many people who write books. But it's like, that was 5,000 years ago, So I think humans naturally, maybe maybe it's more obvious now or more accessible because you can just wake up and see someone's, Instagram profile and
Right.
how they're doing.
It's the instantaneous nature of
It's
it.
instant.
Whereas
It's
before
instant.
we had gatekeepers that would
Correct.
keep that kind of attention focused and would bring, hopefully, although not always, as we now know, bring the more qualified or the more talented people to the surface. And I think social media took that gatekeeping away, both to the good and the detriment
Mm-hmm.
of how we consume media.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think that's exactly right. The accessibility of it and who gets to decide. Like the blogs were the first one. Was like, am I a journalist or a blog?
right,
Or a
right.
blogger, sorry. But now it's like, and for the better, like people can promote their own content, which is great. Even self-published authors, I think, deserve a lot of respect for finding a way to get published or deciding to do the whole process themselves.
Do the work themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But there's something to be said about. I remember in grad school there was a piece on like Xerox used to be a research company.
Yep.
And they thought we wouldn't all have our own personal computers or smartphones. It would all be embedded in the walls. And I don't think that would have worked for the US, but I wonder like what would it be like if no one had access to their own personal devices and we had to actually share. So I think also the media becomes even more selfish or individualistic when it's your avatar or your profile or it's not like a
Right.
guild.
Then you're also competing with the platforms themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you get deplatformed or not, or whether you rise in a certain platform more than another, kind of thing.
But
You can
yeah,
have a great TikTok following and be big over there, but have absolutely nothing going on in Instagram. I know a lot of YouTubers who have big platforms and they say, oh, I have an Instagram or I have a Twitter account and I've only got 100 users over there. And you're looking at their YouTube count and it's rather high. So
yeah.
I think the platforms themselves can also play against people in that way.
Yes. Yeah. And the same thing for like indie movie makers versus those who work for Netflix or Apple. It's like, do you want the creative? Maybe they have actually a really nice following, but they don't have the mega power of
Mm-hmm.
Netflix or Apple. I think
Right.
you're right.
Well, is there anything else about To All the Friends I Killed that you want to share with the world?
I think language was really important. Like it was a book. And I think just like I don't know if you can really see it here, but if I do a quick scan, but it's sort of I mean it's thin, but it's still the writing is important. Like the chapters are really short, and most of them. So I think for me that was a compromise of, well, maybe my generation reads less, but that doesn't mean they don't pay attention. So how do you get that nice balance between like a 400-page novel and like a 9-second Vine or like 60-second TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like that was a compromise, but I think language was still really important. I was writing and I wanted, I think they say like certain presidents speak at like a 6th grade level and certain presidents speak at like a 9th grade level. And like that shapes how they communicate. And hopefully this has at least a 9th grade level, but
Yeah, you've got all the bigly words.
yeah, crafted. So we'll see. I mean, so yeah, language is really important still. And I think that was part of, even if we're a very image driven society now, I still think it's important to press to create language as a good tool.
Agreed. Congratulations. So what's up next for you? What are you working on?
I right now I think the next book will be like a collection of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
I am doing an adaptation of the book into a film. I'm working with
Oh, cool.
Very cool.
she was an assistant director for Little Women, the film that was out in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I've slowly been feels like a crash course in screenwriting, but slow process, but that's been going on in the background. And then the new work would be like short stories. I have one I've been working on right now about a grandfather, like this character trying to steal this grandfather's housing because in like some small town in Italy, because Paris is too expensive and Berlin's too expensive, and even small towns in America are too expensive now. So like he thinks this. I mean, it's irrational, but he thinks this character is this grandfather is the way in.
Nice. There's a movie. It's either just out or it's coming out. It's called Estate. It's got Toni Collette in it, and Kathleen Turner plays the old aunt.
Okay.
And Toni Collette and her sister Anna Faris are basically trying to get the old lady's house when she dies.
This character's just going for a room, not even a house.
Okay.
No, we'll see. Yeah, I it's hard because I think it takes so long to, especially I don't, like Joyce Carol Oates or like Dan Brown. I think they like churn out like a book a year or a book every half year or whatever, something insane. Like, or Taylor Swift, like an album every 1 month or whatever she's doing. But
yeah, but what we don't always see is how much assistance they've got.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually, it's a lot easier to have multiple businesses and ventures if you have many people working.
When you have a team working
Right.
for you.
No.
My people.
Yeah. It's like, I think Michelle Obama, she like worked out every day. I'm like, well, if I had a personal trainer every day, then I also would take help,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is it Patterson has a team of writers? He hands them the outline he wants, lets them write it, and then he edits them.
Yeah.
Which is how he churns out 2 to 3 a year. So
I respect like the Nelly Furtado route, which is like one album every however many years.
Mm-hmm. When it's all yours.
It's all I think there's a lot of reward in that, taking your time with each work.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough crap and material out
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want my legacy to be that.
No. Well, speaking of social media sites, which one is the best for people to follow you and keep up with your updates?
Probably Instagram, and then subsection Instagram stories.
Oh, cool.
I'll post like random. It'll be like cutting an onion. It'll never be like the recipe itself. It's just like the art of it,
There you
I
go.
love it.
Like
There you go.
The sizzling of the searing the whatever I'm searing,
Well,
Nice.
that I think that's brilliant. I really do.
Yeah.
It's like a re-envision of ASMR, but doing it visually.
Yeah. So I would say Instagram if they want to follow, and then Instagram stories. Because my Instagram, I think, has a link to my website and stuff. So
Perfect. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
no, this was great.
We'll come back when you write the short story, or you
Yeah.
can get that going, or even if you finally land the film project, let us know what's going. Keep in touch. Let us know what's
That would
going
be
on.
fun. Yeah. It's sort of like it's the winter phase. It's sort of like I'm okay hibernating, and
Right.
we'll see what comes out.
As writers, we get it.
Yep, 100%.
But,
All right,
I'll come back.
folks.
You let me.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, folks. Head to Instagram. Follow Joshua Kent Bookman is his @handle. Thank him for joining us today, Joshua. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Vance and Baz. That was fun.
And now, on to our review.
So, here we are. Final 3 episodes of the month. I'm going to let you guys talk because, you guys, one of you guys figure out who wants to go first on the final 3 episodes of season 1 of Sense8.
Albert, why don't you go first?
Sure. So, I was really impressed by the episodes. However, the very last episode was really hard to watch. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't expecting so much drama, but the scenes with Riley and everything, there were like little bits where I actually skipped ahead because I just couldn't. It was so harrowing. I don't know what you guys thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, I mean, it's been dark the whole time because they've been specifically digging into the characters.
Yeah.
Like into their lives, tearing them apart, literally ripping them down. It was right about here, so probably episode 10-ish,
Hmm.
where I realized that, okay, the mentors, I'm going to air quote that, the mentors that the characters have had are untrustworthy and unreliable, which means that we as the audience have no one to explain to us what's going on. We don't have a narrator. Right. We don't have mentors we can trust. And at that point, that's 10 hours of commitment and still not knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
But I'll counter that, at least for me, that I think it put you as the viewer in the same boat with the 8 characters in the Sense8 group that you have been invested in, because then you really feel the level of isolation. Not only complexity. Yeah, well, not isolation. Because I'll counter that, because I think that the last episode really started to show how they are starting to gel and come together to the point where they realize how to access one another when it's necessary, and to be attentive, to kind of have like their antenna up of when their talents could be the most germane to the situation. And I think that's what episode 12 said for me. I think I'll go to a line that Sun says, and I forgot how much I love her as a character. When she was 4 guys, you need to get more guys if you think this is going to stop me. I love her. I love her so much. But yeah.
When I said isolation, I was referring to their little poly family of Psychic 8 as an isolated family. They have no one they can trust. I mean, they have their, like, each individually in their lives, they have the 1 or 2 people that love them that are still there, and they're great support. But in terms of the bigger world and the bigger plot, they are isolated.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what season 2 through to the end focuses on. Is I think what the thrust of it was is that they wanted these 8 characters who were activated or birthed on in a stressful situation with Angelica, that they're thrust into it. And the thing you get in season 2 to the end is that the other clusters weren't born in that way. And so their ability to interface with the rest of the cluster community is different to how our gang, our Sense8 cluster, how they rise to the occasion. And it really becomes a family that they learn to trust one another, and they use it to their greatest advantage.
That's future knowledge. That is not even hinted at in season 1.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hinted at.
All we get is that
sequences. When they're really coordinating themselves, and the one sequence I love the most out of the final episode, and I watched it like 4 times to catch how they did it, is when they're all on the boat in Iceland going across the water, and they're all sitting in the back of the boat, and the camera sweeps around the ship, and as it comes around the other side, they all disappear except for Riley and Will. And I just thought that was so beautifully done.
Oh, it is beautifully done. But your point about comparing them to other clusters, there's no hint of that in season 1. 0.
Yeah, there's very little information. I don't know. Actually, back to what you were saying, Baz, about like Sun saying, "Oh, there's only 4 guys. There should be more." I actually found myself getting a little bit disconnected from the action in the very big fight scenes that happened in episode 10 and 11, or maybe 11 and 12, where there's one of the Sense8s against impossible odds, surrounded by people with guns and everything, and somehow it works out. I don't actually know whether being really good at martial arts makes you kind of like a superhero. I don't know, like the scene with Capheus. There were people with guns all around him. Yes, he's really good because Sun was with him, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't think that was very realistic.
Yeah, it definitely requires stretching the imagination on that one. I mean, the other along with that, the other thing it seems to be is they can take each other's pain for a while. Like in those fights, specifically in those fight scenes, I think we saw one where Leto took Wolfgang's pain for a while.
Right, yeah.
So, again, the
Oh,
science.
well, I think they experience everything, good, bad, and in everything in between. That when they choose to use that connection, they take on all of what that means, kind of thing.
But to what extent? Like, for example, when Will and Riley are sharing that very deep moment near the end of the episode, if I were suddenly to experience what Riley experienced, I would be a mess. I would be unable to function for a very long time just because of how horrible it was what she experienced. So, like, I don't know, are they maybe making the pain less by sharing it, or are they experiencing it in full?
My only thought on that is that at this juncture, it seems to be that it's not a complete connection all of the time. It's when it's under duress that they feel these things. But I think they also have a way of shutting down the connection if they really feel vulnerable. So I think it plays to both angles, which is why Kala can go through what she went through with Papa G and the attack on him at the temple. And yet the others don't seem to have that kind of experience. You don't see an acknowledgement of that happening. I mean, you see Will join her later when she goes back to the temple, and you see him respond to it. But I think it's because she feels she has no one to fall on, and she feels very, very isolated. And that's when they step in because they sense the isolation. So I think part of it is they're learning, how do I insert myself and when do I stay out of it? It seems to be a, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. It seems to be something that you have to find your middle ground on how to access the Sense8 cluster. And I think this whole first season was them trying to come to terms with it, where I think, as with the other clusters, and I know this is future knowledge, but I think with the other clusters, they benefited from being shown how to do it, because their ability to communicate and to work with each other seems rock solid, and our group has a hill to climb. That it appears, at least to me, when I watched the whole thing, it appeared to me they really had to come into their own and grow up as a cluster very quickly, because they're in the middle of basically a war, a showdown between clusters, and it's something they never asked for, and they had no idea they were part of, and suddenly they've got all this shit to deal with, as well as their own personal lives, of what's going on, so.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed, and it took me this long to actually realize it, is the writers did a very solid example of show, don't tell. And I think they had multiple reasons for it. They didn't want to get nailed for it. They didn't want to lose a core segment of the audience. But Leto and Nando aren't a couple. They are part of a poly family with, why am I blanking on her
Daniela.
name? Daniela. Because as a family, they don't exist without her. I mean, Leto and Nando are the only two having intercourse, but she is certainly part of the love, and she is definitely part of the intimacy, and she's there during the romance, which is how she gets the picture that causes all of their problems.
But I love Nando's reaction when she takes the picture again. Actually, he goes, Really?
But that's just it. It's not. They're not just a gay couple. It is a poly family, fair and square, and that word is never used in the series, at least not in season 1. It is not addressed that way, and I think the writers, one, like I said, were doing a show don't tell, but I also think they were really afraid of losing their gay audience, because all of a sudden I realized I wasn't represented.
I don't know. I think that's a family dynamic thing and not necessarily a personal relationship thing. And I think, I mean, I see your point, and I do agree with you that it is a poly family, but I think family is the key word there. And I'm not saying that thruples or, quadruples or whatever the combination may be in a polyamorous situation. But I think the level of what you think of love is kind of has its own qualifications in there. So I think that they represent as gay men, and I do have future knowledge, so I kind of know where this goes. But I will say that does not detract at all from their gayness. She still is the cis heterosexual female in this group. And I think it speaks more to the fascination and the connection between gay men and straight women. And I think it speaks more to that than it does of a polyamorous situation, because while they may love and care for her, it's not the be all end all of why they're together. I think it becomes a factor only because Nando didn't want to live in fear anymore, and he had to push this button to get Lito to realize it.
Even before the breakup, she was present during the intimacy, though.
She was, but I think she inserted herself. I don't know that Lito was 100% comfortable with that whole situation. I think Nando was more open to how that played out, but at the same time, I think it was a growing experience, and I think Nando is more exploratory, whereas Lito has very rigid ideas of what he thinks it's supposed to be. And I think that Daniela represented a way for Nando to get Lito to see that. And I think that's where that comes from. So,
and maybe the characters are still learning about each other, because it's all very new for those three. So maybe in season 2, like we can see a little bit more about that.
I also say that I think what's really interesting is that in the first season, you have a bunch of characters, partners, and people in their lives who really have to make a huge leap of faith to be there for, Diego with Will. And, especially his is probably the most strained situation because,
well, these 3 episodes, it was non-existent because Will was gone.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that you have a situation where it's not somebody who's in an amorous situation, or not somebody who's in a family situation, or it's a friendship, a partnership, nonetheless, and they don't degrade it because it's that. But I think Diego has the biggest leap of faith, because really, what he has no skin in the game fully. You know what I mean? And so I think what they end up going with season 2 is that you begin to see the value of these partners making that leap of faith. And they kind of take, from what I recall, and I haven't watched the second season over again, but what I recall is correct, Amanita kind of is the catalyst for how this all starts to happen. And I love her playing that role. I think Amanita is one of the coolest characters in this, because she's just phenomenal in playing this Agma Freeman. So should we get to our ratings?
Sure.
We should.
Okay. I'll go first. You would think it'd be all 5s across the board with the way that I love the series, but I have a real problem on the rewatching with this Sicilium whole thing. It's just wrong. It's wrong. It's inappropriately applied. I think it was a buzzword that they latched onto. Like I said, it's more of an entanglement than it is mycelium oriented. So I'm going to knock the writing down to a 3.5. And because of that, I think the direction was flawed in some ways, that they approached it, because they leaned a little too hard on a science that didn't present a proper medium. They talk about it as if this ethereal connection of the sensates was enough to actually cause this network to happen, and that's not the way it works. So it's a flawed perspective. So for me, I have to knock both the writing and the directing down to 3.5. So I come up with a 4.5 for my final.
All right. I'll actually go through them. Production quality, solid 5. This was beautiful. They spared no expense on location, especially. Astounding production value. Script screenplay, I gave it a 4. Similar reasons. 1, the science, but 2, while they do artfully play with happy, sad emotions and they take you, the viewer, on a roller coaster, so you're never sitting too long in one, I do think they spend too much time in the dark and the pain and the hurt, which is why I knocked it down to a 4. It's still beautiful and still really well done, and the tying up of 8 lives in this level to this level of detail is astounding, but it was still kind of hard to watch in a lot of places. Sound lighting score, 5. It was always perfectly lit for what was going on. The music always fit. It was beautiful there. Art direction, costuming, also a 5. Again, everything was exactly what I felt it should be. Nothing ever stood out as bad on that front. Casting, 5. This cast blew my mind. They were so fantastic at these roles. Directing, exactly the same reason you did. I brought it down to a 4 because I do think the director and the directing staff could have brought some of these issues better resolution, or even put a stop to, like, especially the bad science. Queer themes presented, 5. We do see a gamut, 100%, and they're explored pretty deeply. So personal overall rating, 4.75. Albert?
Excellent.
Nice. So for me, like, the overall production quality was a solid 5. Like you both said, it was really impressive. Everything they did, the amount of money they must have spent, it's just mind blowing. It's really cool. Now, for screenplay and the writing, this is, I think, where I really, really wanted to be enthralled by the series, by everything. But I'm giving it a 3 because by the end of the series, I wasn't getting the payoff that I was expecting, and there were many little plot holes that kind of took me out of the action. And I do get a sense that maybe 8 main characters is too much. I think that it would have been better, I don't know, like to have maybe fewer characters so we could explore them in greater depth. So maybe not everyone was having this weird, or like maybe this enormous earth-shattering crisis going on in their lives. Because I found that, for example, with so many characters, we are kind of getting little pockets, like, for example, Wolfgang and Kala are always together, and they are kind of always interacting together, not really so much with the others until the end. So I don't know, I didn't enjoy the writing as much as I would like, but everything else was really nice. Like the sound lighting score, great. I loved everything. Like I actually liked the music they picked aside from the original score. The music was really nice. And art direction and costuming, wow, really, really cool. Everything was, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience there, but I enjoyed watching
What numbers do you have for?
Oh, sorry, for 5. All of those are 5, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So screenplay is the only 3, I think. Everything else is a 5. Like art direction and costuming is also a 5. Casting, 5, of course. Wow. I don't think I have ever seen such a diverse cast. It was really, really nice, especially when they would like maybe speak a little bit in their own language. That was it didn't happen very often, but it kind of gave more depth to the actor. So I like that. Direction, I don't really know a lot about direction, so I'm giving it a 5 just because I think it must have been such an enormous logistic and planning challenge to get this show to the way it is. And queer themes is also a 5. There's lots of nice representation. I really like the way that they are humanizing queer people for a mainstream audience, because when this show was made, the Wachowskis were and still are a household name. So for them to actually take queer characters and make them a part of the 8 was really, really worthwhile, I think. And my personal rating, I think it's going to be a 4, specifically because of the writing. I think this show showcases the skill of the directors more than it tells, for me at least, a very compelling story. And there's also the issues with the science, which there's not a lot of science. But yeah, I mean, it's a very enjoyable show.
I have one question for you guys that I forgot to ask in the prelim going into our ratings. What did you guys think of the birthing sequences? I mean,
why?
It was like,
my question is why?
Wow. Wow. That's all I can say. And especially Nito's birth, where they're all fucking watching TV. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I actually think that might be a famous scene in a telenovela or something. I seem to vaguely recall that.
It looked really familiar to me too.
Yeah. So, it was interesting that they showed that, but how exactly are the 8 having that memory? They had just been born. That's one of the things that I appreciate from a technical standpoint, but how are they like, who was perceiving that?
The best I could come up with was Riley fixating on the other birth that she had gone through that had emotionally destroyed her, and it tapped into an infant memory of hers that then sparked everybody else's. It's the best I could come up with. I can't say that that's what they were aiming for, but that was the best link that I could come up with.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted your guys' thoughts on that.
It was it was unexpected. I think it was like 10 minutes of that. I don't
It
know.
was an entire aria of that. And I suspect the reason Baz is asking is because there's a birth in the book that I wrote that is extremely important to the character's arrival in this world and ability to leave this world. And I suspected that's why he was asking. And you know what? Only because I didn't see how the 8 in Sense8 got from the birth that was tearing Riley apart, the loss of her own child, to their own births. I just didn't see that bridge in the story that I was watching. It makes me think, well, nope, I'll go back to my story.
I think it's how do I say this? I think what it was is that they were reliving their births and coming to the realization they all have the exact same birthday. They
Will
all
knew that,
have the
though.
exact same. Huh?
And Will knew that, and I thought he had.
Yeah, some
he
of
and
them
Riley,
already
he and
knew.
Riley
He
had
does.
figured that out.
Yeah, they have the same birthday, but I think it was the cluster coming to the realization of what that meant, and I think it's one of the things that solidifies when they finally do start to work together. They begin to see a bridge that they can access instantaneously that is more attuned to the needs when the needs are necessary, and I think that was what they were attempting to do with that. That's the way I took it. Can I just say also, just as a small sidebar, can I just give them props for not making classical musicians appear to be so stodgy?
Oh yeah, that was a very
They're
nice
not
detail.
cool. I mean, I'm like, people don't understand. Having worked in classical arenas like I do, these people are freaking nuts. And I think it's because classical music is so structured. I think that's why their personalities are so much bigger, and why they do things like this is because they're in a very confined space with their art, that I think it causes them to want to emote and react and do things in a different way that you would not normally expect classical musicians to do. But I loved that they included it, and it was a nice touch. There was no real big meaning behind it, but it was just a nice touch that warmed my heart, because it's like, my community was seen. So. All right,
folks, there's our take on season 1 of Sense8. Albert, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was such great fun. I would actually never have finished watching this show had it not been for this, and I'm glad I did.
Perfect. Folks, go to albertnothlit.com, springboard off of that to his socials if you want to interact with him, or pick up one of his books. He is a master at science fiction because he knows the science, the real science. Case in point, he actually figured out trivalve birds. So, and he figured out how they fly. I'm not joking. He did his work.
Right.
But
It's always fun, yeah.
Albert, thank you so much.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, let's move on to what won the week for Baz and I. It's been really fun working with Albert this month.
Yeah, it has. It's going to be a lot of fun to look forward to our next month, which is for the whole romantic month of Valentine's. We're doing a lesbian love month, so look forward to that too for next month. So what are you on about this week?
I'm going to continue my trend of talking about things that I don't think people are talking about. There are local elections coming up, and the candidates are trespassing on my property and leaving their litter rubber banded to my front door.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that kill the environment crap. But here's what I'm on about. Of the 3 seats that I get to vote for, 1 city, 2 county, the Democratic flyer propaganda proudly proclaimed the candidates as Democrat. And then there were 3 flyers that had no party affiliation printed on them. So I looked them up, and of course they were Republican. What does that say that the local candidates do not want to be closely tied to the image of the Republican Party right now. It dawned on me after I was looking them up that this was a thing.
Yeah, I can believe it. I can
Mhm.
totally believe it. I can believe Ron Johnson putting out there that he's not a Republican, at least advertising wise. The whole fucking thing is just, it's gotten. George Santos, I'm sorry, is not a, like some rare example. He's just out and proud about all the bullshit that they spread and is unapologetic. In fact, there was somebody who made a comment and said, what would George Santos do if there wasn't an elevator? Because that's literally, in fact, he was trapped in at a shopping mall. Reporters found him and they hounded him, and he says, they asked him what he's going to. He said, "I'm going to go find an elevator, then I'm going to go to the car park and I'm going to drive home." I swear to God, the elevator thing kills me. I just, God forbid this man ever go in a one-story building. He can't find a way out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what else are you on about?
The other thing I'm on about isn't specifically queer related, but it is hate crime related. There was another shooting at a nightclub.
Yeah.
It appears to be an Asian community on Lunar New Year, and people are trying to spin it that the shooter was Asian, but that doesn't necessarily detract from the hate crime element of it.
No, and they did find out he is Asian, and,
Yeah.
and they said he was something like between 30 and 40. He ended up being 72. It was like, okay, I guess he just had a really great skin complexion. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a wide gamut to miss.
Yeah. But, I mean, this needs to be addressed. The constant shootings, and people like gloss over them like they're a 5-second news clip and that's it. No, This is endemic to a problem in society. Let's face it.
Yep.
So sorry to be all doom and gloom, but what are you on about?
I'm on about, well, one thing, but two examples, and I'll fly them here so people can see them. Definitely, people, if you have not seen, if you did not watch SNL on Saturday, Bowen Yang is now doing a George Santos routine, and he even works in the fact that he looks Asian. You guys have to watch it. Go check it out. The clips are up on YouTube. It is hysterical. And then he goes on about the whole Katara or Rivoche kind of thing, and he just keeps changing the pronunciation. It's hysterical. It's really, really funny. Only Bowen could bring it like he does for playing George Santos. And then the other thing, there is another comedian, and I can't remember the guy's name, but I will fly it here now while I'm saying this, and then I'll put it down in the show notes with the link to that person's YouTube channel. But he's some comedian, not someone I knew of, but he has this 10-minute spiel of George Santos, every lie George Santos has told that has been recorded. And he puts it in a stream of him just being caught on camera and he says the entire story from A to Z over the timeline of how it happened or didn't happen kind of thing. And it is hysterical. My husband and I were laughing our asses off. And I just happened to find it on YouTube. It was just rando kind of thing that popped up, I guess, because I had a lot of George Santos stuff in my homepage on YouTube. And this guy's video popped up. Never seen him before, didn't know him from Adam, but I played it and my husband and I laughed for a good 10 minutes. It was just hysterical. It was very well done. So I'm on about that. And then there is another YouTuber who has a channel, and it's called Native Media Theory, and it's a native guy who's Navajo, and he's really into media and everything. And so he does breakdowns and takedowns of things that are problematic within media that has to deal with Native communities. And he did this one that I happened to watch last night, just out of the blue, he's doing this whole thing about Avatar and the Native position as a general community about the problematic instances of Avatar, and it's only compounded by the fact that James Cameron cannot help himself in wanting to be the white savior storyteller, and how people kept saying, oh, natives are just too uppity about Avatar, that it's like appropriation or whatever. But then he did this whole thing where he did a documentary of going down into the Amazon like a white savior, and it's cringeworthy to watch what went on there. It was called A Message from Pandora or some shit like that. It's so cringy when you watch it, and you just kind of go, oh, this is so uncomfortable. But I kind of get the idea that he wants to lend his voice and his platform to an issue that natives in the Amazon are dealing with deforestation and the rerouting of the Amazon River. It's flooding plains that have never had that problem before. And I get all of that, and that's great and wonderful, but it's the way he's doing it. You just kind of go, dude, back the F up, you know? And so I highly recommend, I will show a bit of it here, but I'll put a link down below for his channel. It's called Native Media Theory. And he does a lot of different ones where he'll take on, a native perspective, like he did one on the movie Prey when it came out. And so it's kind of interesting to see what he's saying from a native perspective, but also from someone who isn't basically a media whore like, I am. So I get him a lot, but he talks a good game. He comes with his receipts, and he does a balanced thing. He even starts out the one with a takedown on James Cameron, which he calls a rant. And he basically breaks down, he starts with a disclaimer and says, you can like the movie. That's perfectly fine. You can even be native and like the movie. That's fine too. What I'm about to tell you, though, what the hell that was. What I'm about to tell you, though, is I can't tell you how many times we have a situation where, people who are not of a particular community try to be so helpful that they don't realize they cross lines. And so it's interesting to see the perspective of someone from a community like the Native community stepping up and saying, hey, I get what the approach was. But here's why that approach is problematic. But they do it in a constructive way that says, I'm not taking away from something you like. I'm not telling you not to do this. What I'm saying is there's information you may not have, and I want to impart it to you that could change your position, but it doesn't have to, and I kind of like that approach because it's instructional without being browbeating. So give it up for him on Native Media Theory, and I will definitely have a link to his channel on our show notes.
Very cool.
So who won your week?
Simon Dunn. As of this recording, he passed away this morning. They have not released an official statement as to what the cause was yet, but all the scuttlebutt around it indicates suicide. He was 35. For those of you who don't know the name, he was the first out bobsledder, the Olympic team for Australia at the time, but then he went on to play rugby for both London and Australia. And he was always very giving of his time. When a charity needed him, he was there. He was always very supportive of other athletes coming out. And so just the whole situation, the whole news story this morning was really heartbreaking. And I don't want his example to be forgotten.
Right. Well, rest in power.
How about you?
My Who Won the Week is a bit light, but I think we need wonderful things to be spoken of when they happen. And queer icon, goddess, diva, angel from above and on this planet, Dolly Parton gave 25,000 free books to children across Scotland. So she decided to, in part of her whole thing up with her Imagination Library organization and with the Wheatley Foundation and they decided to put together this a whole project of providing thousands of books to children across Scotland. And of course, being authors ourselves and having a predominantly writerly podcast, I just thought it was kind of nice to say, yay, Dolly, this is why we love you.
Mm-hmm. So
that's all I got.
Nice. Any final words of wisdom?
Stay healthy. And here's something, while I caution stay healthy and that kind of thing, talk to your friends. Maybe they need a little pat on the back, a hug, even virtual socially distant hug if needs be because of health reasons. But make sure that you reach out to your friends and give them a pat on the back, a stroke, say, hey, I still see you and you are important. Because a lot of people in the wintertime, it's hard for them. And I think that's something that we should encourage at any time in the year. But it seems to be after the holidays and during the holidays, it's quite tough for a lot of people. So just check in with your friends, check in with your family, check in with people that matter to you, and just say, hey, I was thinking about you.
Perfect. All right, folks, go to the websites for our guests this week, Joshua Bookman or Albert Nothlit. They have their socials. You can springboard off their websites. The links are below. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. Our disclaimers, links to social media, listen stations, sign up as a guest, wrotepodcast.com is the place to do all of that. If you enjoy learning about these artists, like, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, follow us on YouTube. It's growing there by the day. There's going to be more there next month regarding Season 2 of Sense8 and some reaction videos that Albert and Baz are going to do. I think you'll love it. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye now.
What's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.